This is the Dzogchen Semden Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. It is Luke Skywalker Friday early morning. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi. After we chant both the pure golden ore as well as the cuckoo song of pure presence. Meditation classics composed by the great Buddhist reformer Vajra of the Swat Valley. Let's see. Luminous mind inexpressible beyond conceptualization. So, in this context, mind refers to noticing the antics of mind as we breathe in. And luminous in this context is a reference to relaxing into mind's non-graspable nature, wherein mind feels as non-graspable as a light beam. As the light of the teacher is extolled by all, as the heart of experience is like gentle prince. So, gentle prince is an archetype that represents the union of insight and non-graspability. In other words, we non-neurotically, we can recognize insights without being defined by our insights, without being rigid about our insights. One of the great ironies is that simply by playing with mindfulness and meditation once every 12 hours or so, we master the first fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. The view of impermanence, no self, and emptiness occurs to us viscerally and spontaneously. Let us continue chanting. Resting in the spontaneous pleasure of effortless great completion. The sixth fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is accessed effortlessly, simply by playing with mindfulness and meditation once every 12 hours or so. It is known by many names, such as right effort or effortless effort, or doing without doing, or wu wei, or going with the flow, or being in the zone, or expedient means. Let's continue. Let me go back for a second. The more we play with mindfulness and meditation, the more our choices and utterances and deeds flow, not from contrived calculations, nor from wild scatteredness, but instead from love's deeply centered spontaneity. Let's continue. As the basis of all disciplines such as moral conduct, luminous mind provides release in its every mode. How? Through noticing and relaxing. When we make the mistake of, so let me jump back. Sturgeon's law reminds us, no, I don't want to go there right now. When we make the mistake of indulging our controlling tendencies, we tend to overfocus and overanalyze both the dorsolateral, to the point of exhausting the front of our brain, including both the dorsolateral and medial prefrontal cortices, to such a degree that we trigger our amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression, which is a drag. However, when we take a break from the exhausting habit of competing against our own autonomic nervous system and instead cooperate with it passively, that same autonomic nervous system calms the anxiety and aggression of our amygdala and gently stimulates the empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus. That is as easy as noticing in harmony with our inhalation and relaxing in harmony with our exhalation. The late Karma Chakme insisted that the essence of morality, the essence of all the Pratimoksha vows, is simply nonviolence. And to elaborate upon that, the late Tukul Tundap insisted that the highest love is simply the spontaneous and uncontrived byproduct of mindfulness and meditation, wherein we bring the four bases of mindfulness, the mental, the interpersonal, the physical, and the circumstantial, into the path of kind intention, kind communication, kind conduct, and kind commerce in a manner spontaneous and uncontrived. Let's continue chanting. It is like a Buddha's mother in the universal path. Without a Buddha who could not be accomplished. With it, we are the way of supreme liberation. Aha, here we go. So what do we mean by we are the way of supreme liberation? Us and all our sights and sounds and sensations and flavors and sounds and the like, including the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, cognitions, recollections, and imaginings. All of them, be they external or internal, physical or mental, pleasurable or painful, interesting or boring, glorious or grotesque. Let's chant. Subtle and elusive, this universal path transcends the duality of thinking and non-thinking, without location or reference and determinant. It is beyond all conceptualization. Unutterable, it has no color or shape nor sensory field. Intangible and inscrutable, it is inexpressible. So unutterable and inexpressible do not mean it's mysterious and only for a special few. It means we do not get there through blind faith or through pseudo-intellectual drudgery. We get there simply by cooperating with our own autonomic nervous system. As we relax, whatever dualities of internal or external we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could feel as if they were melting into the simplicity of that which is less stressful, less permanent, and less defining. Together. However, whoever follows the path of the ancient ascetics becomes sick from attachment to that contrivance of active focusing, that rigid interpretation of the teacher's instructions is experienced as an arduous quest. As they chase a stream of beliefs and concepts as if pursuing a mirage. But this complete modality cannot be indicated by mere words. Complete refers once again to noticing the antics of mind as we breathe in, and modality refers to relaxing into mind's graspable nature as we breathe out. Let's continue. And any grasping in so-called true doctrine makes a travesty of Vajrasattva, the archetype of simply noticing and relaxing. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks. Let us explore this through the lens of the union of archaeology and anthropology. Approximately 300,000 years ago, the vast majority of our ancestors enjoyed the proto-communism of the Paleolithic era, wherein they enjoyed a culture that trained them to be flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. But nothing lasts forever. Approximately 13,000 years ago, the majority of our ancestors endured the proto-capitalism of the Neolithic era, wherein they were conditioned to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. We are still there as a species, and it really messes things up. We are wired, just like a kitty cat can sometimes have the zoomies and sometimes sit very quietly and very peacefully. We are wired to instinctively seek peace and love. But when our efforts to do so are corrupted by this worldview, the worldview of being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, we wind up, as I mentioned previously, triggering our amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression. Let's continue. Purity and impurity is one inseparably mixed. Pristine awareness as well as bewilderment are indivisible. This lamp of unimpeded clarity, free of conceptualization, along with obstinate befuddlement, in and of themselves each feed powerful meditation. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever clarity or befuddlement we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel as if they were melting into the simplicity of that which is fleetingly less stressful, less permanent, and less grasping. Let's see here. The ground of being. Well, welcome aboard, ground of being. Let me get to your question in a moment. So let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick moment to turn my attention to the comments. Gonna tap button 8. Okay, so Garnet Being, my friend, you are utterly, utterly welcome. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation or philosophy, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window. I live to answer these questions. I live to make your journey easier and swifter than mine was. Let's see, I'm going to tap button 7. Okay, here we go. Together. This direct insight, seeing directly, sees merely an empty nothing. Aha. Okay, un momento, s'il vous plaît. All right. Yet it is called the Buddha of omniscience. So know the empty nature of vastness without center or boundary. For here lies undiscriminating, powerful non-duality. So let's take a break from meditation and instead look at philosophy. Over multiple centuries, institutional Buddhism has made a mess of selflessness or no self, as well as emptiness. Let's, like a cat whose head is stuck in an empty bag of Doritos, let us back our way out of that confusion and see if we can't make sense of that. All the confusion about meditation and philosophy are dispelled most efficiently by viewing them through the metaphoric lens of neuroscience. So let's do that briefly right now. We're going to do it really fast, Mach 5 with our hair on fire. If I go too fast, if I lose you, don't be shy. Let me know. So here's how it works. We're going to begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are wired by evolution to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord, which could be described as the core of our sympathetic nervous system. It has evolved to help us to notice in a very special way. It has evolved to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice all of mind's antics of perception, emotion, intention, cognition, recollection, and imagination. All of them, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. But what are we to do with all this stuff that we noticed? In a word, we're going to meditate, but that requires some elaboration. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access both the tippy top as well as the very bottom of that same spinal cord. These two extremes working together as a team could be described as the core of our parasympathetic nervous system, which has evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release during each exhalation to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could, fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even as non-graspable as a vast empty void, at least for a moment, until our next inhalation when the cycle begins afresh. But there's some confusion here. What is a real world? A simile is only as effective as it is relatable. Therefore, we have to ask the question, what? What is a real-world example of a non-graspable, vast, empty void? And here's the example. Imagine it's a warm summer's morn. We take a nice thick blanket, set it on the grass, and we lie on our backs on the grass and gaze at the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn. We could reach towards that sky with fingers splayed and strive to seize that sky and return our fists to a place before our face and then open our fingers. And yet when we do, we will not find even a trace of blue. Forgive the rhyme. Because for us puny humans, stuck on the ground, the illusion of the infinite sky is literally non-graspable. Figuratively, every time we relax, we are wired, whether we know it or not, to taste of that same non-graspability. Now, does that mean if you master emptiness, you'll never feel pain, you won't need anesthesia? Malarkey. Remember, there are two truths, the conventional and the ultimate. And just like the pendulum of a grandfather clock swinging backwards and forwards, with each inhalation, we are wired to notice the conventional of samsara. With each exhalation, we are wired to notice the ultimate of nirvana, swinging back and forth like Tarzan on a vine in the deep jungles of the mythical forests of the 1930s movies. So, but what about selflessness? What about no self? No self is just another metaphor. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever label or sense of self we might have noticed during our inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even less graspable. At least a little bit, at least for a moment, until our next inhalation and the cycle begins afresh. You see, neither no self nor emptiness is a tool to stop us from ever noticing convention. Au contraire, it's simply a fleeting tool to help us cope. What if enlightenment was simply mastery of the Buddha's Eightfold Path of Enlightenment? What if mastery simply meant getting so good at something that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively? Each of us, as children, mastered using the commode instead of our diapers, brushing our teeth, tying our shoes, riding a bike, reading, writing, and arithmetic. We learn to master those things. We can master the Buddha's path in as little as 7 days, according to the penultimate passage of the Satipatthana Sutta. Let's continue. Luminous mind and its habits are one inseparably mixed. Okay, so habits is a word we're going to play with right now. Let's go over here. Luminous mind and its habits are one inseparably mixed. So luminous mind here, in this context, luminous refers to the conventional, that mind can perceive a limitless amount of phenomena. As I mentioned previously, the external, the internal, the physical, the mental, the pleasurable, the painful, the glorious, and the grotesque. But mind has evolved to give us survival mechanisms, which are useful. The only problem is that sometimes we get stuck in our survival mechanisms. And we'll explore that more in a moment. Let's continue. All manifested experiences are merely generated by mind. And shine is a torment neither accepted nor rejected. So simply let it be and enjoy. So those habits, those survival habits. I'm going to put this right here real quick. Survival. This is what we call amplifying the text. Let's make sure this is fitting on the screen. Kawabunga, here we go. What are the 5 F's of our survival instincts? There's a part of our brain, our underbrain, a very old part of our brain that seems to ask subliminally, hey, that thing over there, should I fuck that? Should I feed on that? Should I fight that? Should I flee from that? Should I faint before that? Or should I fawn over that? Once again, that is useful as the occasional survival instinct. You know, when you have to protect your neighbor's kids from a rampaging bear. But how often does that happen? If we get stuck there, our lives become very superficial and deeply unfulfilling. But by simply noticing and relaxing, we become freed from the tyranny of this shallow existence. Let's continue. Activity that is personally repugnant or culturally taboo, such as the 5 mental poisons or the so-called unforgivable crimes, could be the realization of powerful non-duality. For on this path of Bhakti Yoga's purification, nothing is rejected, not even sex. So Bhakti Yoga and Mahasandhi and Trekcho and Dzogchen and even Sutra Mahamudra are all synonyms for simply noticing and relaxing in harmony with our breathing. 1, 2, 3. Let's hear 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. Let's hit copy and paste. First copy. 1, 2, 3, and here we go. Let's hit paste. So next time I can speak a little bit more better. So the purity of Bhakti Yoga is simply cooperating with our natural tendencies to notice and relax in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalations. We don't have to force it. Our autonomic nervous system, of which the sympathetic core, the parasympathetic core are components, is already wired to notice and relax. In fact, it already does that automatically in the background like an app on your smartphone, whether or not we notice it. Then why? Why do we silently and mentally recite these verbs in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation as we sit in mindfulness and meditation? Why do we do that? To remind our volition, to remind our intention, to remind our will that for the next few moments, we're going to take a relaxing break from the exhausting habit of actively competing against our own autonomic nervous system and instead cooperate with it passively. Let's continue. One's intellect could be harmfully conditioned by the elitism and rigidity of tradition and literalism, such as the 3 contrived analogues of samadhi's awareness, bliss, and love, which is reflected in the folly of thought suppression or the folly of playing with our channels, winds, and drops in the hopes of chasing various states, or the folly of active visualization? Let's continue. As well as the dogmatic belief and doctrine, which are the delusions that undermine effortless transmission. Instead of such folly, let us abide in the spontaneous pleasure of the spontaneous free from great completion of Dzogchen. And once again, Dzogchen is just a Tibetan word for great completion or great perfection. Perfection and completion being synonymous, or they can be synonymous. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, including people, including meditation teachers. Therefore, the sad truth is the majority of Dharma practitioners, the majority of Bantes and Shifus and Roshis and Lamas prance about the countryside insisting that it's just Jim Dandy to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. But it's not. It does more harm than good. That is why people on the path of patriarchy talk about the path of enlightenment, requiring a length of time equal to the birth and death of 3 universes. Whereas in proto-Buddhism, dominated by being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind, in proto-Buddhism, the Buddha said, dude, you can do this in as little as 7 days. So we have a choice. Do we follow in the footsteps of grumpy Mace Windu or groovy Qui-Gon Jinn? Do we follow in the footsteps of the crotchety Big Lebowski or the cool dude? The decision is yours. I leave it to you. Let's continue. The core of sublime spontaneous awareness, imperturbable, unchanging, and unelaborated, which is the ambrosia of the timeless consummation that vanquishes the pain of any exertion. Thus resting in the here and now, every ambition is spontaneously fulfilled. One of the coolest counterintuitive things I've encountered is this. There is no need to actively manifest. We are already wired to notice peril and pleasure. We are already wired to notice that which is destructive and that which is beneficial. We don't need to write up a 5-year plan as individuals. We don't need to write a vision board. We don't need to contrive certain emotions or certain visualizations. The most effective way, the most sustainable way to manifest our needs and preferences is to make a habit of at least twice daily sitting and noticing and relaxing in harmony with our respective breaths. This might not be the most spectacular way to get what you want when you want for as long as you want, but it will get your needs met in a sustainable way. And that's the key, sustainable way. And if you're as geeky as me, if you're as nerdy as me, then you've read tales where someone is given a wish, the wish manifests in a dark way that bites them in the ass. I was in junior high when I read of the monkey's paw. Do you remember that dreadful story? Yuck. there is we can look at the life story of the wonderful author who gave us Kurt Vonnegut, who left an okay marriage and swapped out his wife for a girlfriend and then wound up in a miserable relationship. Does that mean you should always stay in an unfulfilling relationship? No. What it means is we can move through life's changes like a bull in a china shop, forcing changes, or we can allow changes, allowing our choices and utterances and our deeds to flow from love's deeply centered spontaneity, which is a byproduct of the mindfulness and meditation wherein we notice and relax in harmony with our inhalations and our exhalations. Let's continue. Hey, magnificent one, listen all and everything in experience, which shares the same empty nature of the luminous mind, is like an all-inclusive essential drop whose nature cannot be controlled by the dualities of contemplation or concentration, expansion or contraction, generation or sensation, unconfined. It is simply being. So, simply put, every time we relax into our exhalation, whatever contemplation or concentration we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel as if it was melting into the same empty nature. Together. This inconceivable essence chronologically always present like the sky, and locationally everywhere present like space transcends ideas and speech. There is, no matter how eloquent your teacher might be, it is no substitute for noticing and relaxing vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. We conclude, we tie this up in a big red bow with the cuckoo's song of pure presence. The nature of multiplicity is non-dual, and things are naturally pure and simple. Being contrivance free in the here and now, shining out in all forms, it is always all good. Thus already complete exertion is now redundant, and spontaneity ever natural. Each of us, every complex living being, has an autonomic nervous system. We are wired to cooperate with it, and thus wired to master the Buddhist path. Doing so is an inevitability. The only question is, will we do it as soon as possible so we can enjoy our lives even more? Or will we postpone it to some distant future? Back in the 70s, there was a auto parts commercial where the tagline is, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. I'd rather pay you now. I'd rather master this path and enjoy a rich life than endure a shitty life and master this at the end of life. How about you? Oopsie. Having completed our opening recitation, we could now shift gears. And now let us sit and breathe and notice and relax. Welcome aboard. I'd like to get you up to speed. Let us begin by gently inviting our subtle energies to coalesce at the top of our head. To do that, we shall use two techniques. The first one relies on adjusting our respiratory frame of reference, which is a very sophisticated way of saying, as we feel air enter our nostrils, let us silently and mentally recite the verb noticing. And as we feel air exit our nostrils, let us silently and mentally recite the verb relaxing. There's also something we can do with our fingers. We could touch the tip of our left index finger, or we could use the tip of our left index finger to support the great knuckle at the base of our right index finger, palms up in our lap. Now, in addition to our left hand doing that, our left hand can do something else. Our left thumb we can set the tip of our left thumb upon the lower set of creases of its little finger, thus keeping track of our first set of 12 inhalations. The actual inhalations will count with our right hand. Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb noticing during our inhalation, we can advance our left thumb, beginning with its little finger. Together, let us do this for the next minute or so. Having run out of finger creases on the right hand, we return our attention to our left hand and advance the left thumb to the next set of creases. And so now you get the basic idea of how we could count 12 sets of 12 inhalations each over the span of approximately 12 minutes. If this seems overwhelming, allow me to reassure you that repetition is the mother of skill. Come to these live streams once every 12 hours, and within a week or two, this method you can master. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist philosophy or meditation, Do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 6 minutes or so. Let us now energetically switch gears and gently invite our real or imagined subtle energies to coalesce in our chest. There are two methods we shall use. The first is simply adjusting our respiratory field of reference, frame of reference. As we feel our chest swell with breath, silently and mentally we could recite the verb noticing. As we feel our chest subtly sink, as gently we exhale, we could silently and mentally recite the verb relaxing. We could use, instead of using our index finger, we could use the tip of our left middle finger to support the lower knuckle of our right middle finger, palms up in our lap. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. For Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers just like you. In approximately 10.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's dusk recitation, explanation, and practice of meditating like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.